Having a strong AI foundation these days is the backbone of any career moving forward. And one of the most important tools to learn is Claude Code. Claude Code isn't just for developers. You can be a vibe coder, you can be a project manager, you can be a founder. It's an extremely powerful application that you can use on your desktop. If you're not familiar with Claude Code, don't worry, I got you covered. In this lesson, I'm going to start you off with the basics. You can learn terminology, you can learn the basics, and I'm going to help you get started very easily. You don't need 10 tutorials and 20 PDFs to learn about Claude Code. You just need some foundational knowledge and some practice. I'm also going to provide you with some resources you can download and refer later on. So if you're ready to learn Claude Code, this session is for you. And make sure you like and subscribe and hit that bell notification icon for more content like this. So this is what we're going to be talking about. We're using Claude Code. And the goal of this lecture is to show you a workflow that you can use to kind of set up Claude Code. Claude Code is built for developers. You can use it for other knowledge work as well, but ideally it's really good for writing code and helping you build products, prototypes in this case, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's move on. Here is today's agenda. We're going to first start talking about a little bit of theory, and then we'll go into some practical. The theory things I want to talk about is difference between how engineers build things and versus what the current sort of the new vibe coders build things. And a lot of us are not engineers coming into the tech industry. I myself, I'm included. I am learning tremendously. I probably started in the tech industry about 3 years ago. I run a business and I needed to develop things around that. And that's how I got into the industry and I needed to learn. And once I came in, I kind of really got excited about it and I can't stop now. So I'm kind of hooked. We're going to talk about something called BRTTR. Don't worry about the acronym. I'll tell you what it is. That's a recommended method that I recommend you start using to build things. We're going to talk about the vocabulary. Again, a lot of people who are new. Let's talk about the vocabulary, all the terms that you got to know. There's going to be way more, but at least when you know these, you're going to know you have the basics to get started. And then we'll go do the practical. I'm going to show you how to set up folder structures in a sort of a hierarchical way. We'll talk about Claude MD, Memory MD, and then just some basic setups. Okay, so that's basically the goal here. Okay, so move on. Okay, so a little backstory I want to tell you. Why do we want to use something like Claude Code? Well, as you know, I'm sure you're using something like ChatGPT, right? And ChatGPT has something where you can actually create projects, right? And inside those projects, you can create different sort of AI chats, you want to call it, and multiple ones that you can create along the way. The problem is that what happens when you are working with code or you're working with another set of knowledge bases, it ends up that what ends up happening is that the stuff that you're working on stays here and you'll have to manually extract it and take it on your desktop or put it on GitHub or whatnot. The idea behind Claude Code is not only that it's a great coding agent and tool, but it keeps things on your desktop. And then you can then access it anytime you want. You can share it to GitHub, you can share it to other places, but the hub that where everything starts from is your desktop. And it gives you a lot bigger context window as well, because every time you want to upload a file or anything, you don't have context limitations, you don't have upload limitations or number of file limitations. So that's the idea behind it, is that it centralizes everything in that you can work from, and then you can decide where you want to spread that information, right? Okay, so that's really why we use it. Let's get into theory. Okay, this is probably one of the most important slides that I want to talk about. It looks like a lot going on here, but I want to talk to you guys about what is currently happening with the way people build. I'm going to zoom in here. Here's what we're going to talk about: how engineers build and how vibe coders build. Let's talk about how engineers build. Engineers, whether you're a software engineer or a construction engineer, it goes through the same workflow. You start with basically you brief a specialist. Okay, we put LLM here, but in the case of a software engineer, but it could be any kind of specialist. In our LLM, our AI is a specialist. So we brief it about what we want. Then they review and edit a blueprint. This is the plan that's going to be executed. And as you can see, this money here, this is money spent in this stage because it's a fairly long stage. You need to review, you need to make edits, you need to understand what is happening. And you need a little bit of expertise to do this. And then you sign off on this plan based on all the analysis you've done, and then you build. And you spend some money here as well building. What a lot of vibe coders are doing is this over here. They brief the LLM, they with a prompt, it starts to build without them knowing what's happening at all. No plan in terms of like do you even know what's happening? What's the plan that they're executing? They spend some money here. It gives them something, and then they go back and fix it again. By the way, this will happen with Claude Code too if you're not careful. And then they go back and fix it and spend some more money. And then they go back and fix it again, or in many cases, they have to go rebuild various parts of it and spend more money. And what it ends up is that there's no plan in place. They're just iterating, and just building. And it's not a very smart way to create anything. And then, in fact, it doesn't happen. If I've been in the construction industry myself. If I came to your house and said I'm going to, renovate your kitchen, and I bring in a specialist, and we start just tearing everything apart and not building something, and then it make a mistake and then redo it, make a mistake, redo it, makes no sense. This is not how you start with a plan. So you need to think more like an engineer when you're vibe coding, when you're building a product, than this group. And starting with a prompt and ending with a product makes no sense. You need to understand a plan. You need to break it up into pieces, and we'll talk about that in a second. And you need to um, have a way that you understand what is happening. My recommendation is to take some software architecture courses. And there are a lot of them for free out there. Coursera has one, just so you understand how a software gets the architecture behind it. And I'll talk about a little bit about how software architecture works, but that's really the foundation of how you. Otherwise, you will fall into the trap of spending a lot of money, and you see it out there all the time. Oh, I ran out of usage limits and all that kind of stuff, and you spend a lot of money for no reason. So understand what are you building before you start. The other problem with this approach that is being marketed out there to do, by the way, because people are told to behave this way. This is not the right way, is that you'll never get anything custom. And I'm comparing two different types of houses here. This is a standard house, maybe builder grade. It's been there's an existing blueprint and there's 1,000 of them. And this is a custom house that is designed specifically for an individual. And if you want to create anything valuable in the market, you need to create something custom. So a vibe coding tool where you just type in a prompt and it creates something has already a set of instructions in terms of how it's going to build it. There's already a built-in blueprint. So you're going to get stuff like this out of it more from the back end, from the architectural side of it. It might on the outside look different, or you got different colors, but on the inside, it's still all the same thing. There's no value there. So you need to have something that is architecturally different. And this is why you build in layers, and you have a plan in place, and you analyze the plan. You can even check with experts on the plan. Look, this is what I'm looking to build. You go to a friend, you go to someone. Hiring an engineer that is much smarter than you in this stage right now is way worth it than spending all this time and energy vibe coding something and then having to rebuild it all over again. Okay, so that's why I recommend spending time there. In fact, this is standard of how an AI native team builds, tests, ship product. This is standard industry practice. Plan, design, build, test, review, and then you document and you deploy. How many times do you see build here? Right? Like it's not like 20 times going and building it. Um, so uh, so that's really the message I want to get across here. Hopefully that was very clear. Okay, let's move on now. That acronym I said early in the beginning is the method that I'm recommending you to take as someone who's not a software engineer, because obviously, there's this lack of knowledge on how to do it. So it's called this method: build, review, test, refine, repeat. So you consult the AI and you go into plan mode and you get a plan. The plan you try to ask it for gives you specific components that you need to build to create the whole product. You need to break it up into components. The way you pick these components can be structured depends on you, depends on the application. It can be specific features, like each of these can be features. It can be layers of the product. For instance, it can be like login, and that the setup. It could be database, setting up database. It could be the front end. It could be back end. It could be, and then the back end can split up in so many things. It could be routing channels that you want to. These things should all be split up, and then you take these individual components and you run them through this workflow where you build it with the LLM, you review it, you test it, make sure it works, and then you do some refining work throughout this process. But you're working in isolation in the beginning in terms of however you decide to. And this is a software engineering concept called separation of concern. And the core principle is basically you divide things out and they live in these distinct, independent parts. The benefit of that is that when you decide to go and fix things, or if you bring someone on your team to help you on expanding the product after, let's say, you pass the MVP stage of what you're building, then they're able to understand what is happening. They're able to, you can direct them into where they need to go and to do it. Or if you have an agent that you want to execute on to go into your code base and do things, you can isolate them into that. Because if they do something, let's say, and messes it up, you know it's contained within that. Okay, so there's a quarantine happening. So the architecture that I use, and I'll show you in a second, is called a layered architecture. It doesn't have to be this architecture. You can use different ones. I would recommend, again, research this, as we're not going to cover the details of that, but the one I use is that. And I divide into modules. So, for instance, this is the product that I'm building at my startup. It is basically a product for tile retail showrooms to help their customers decide on tile. And I give them these features. They have a tile visualizer to help them visualize tile, for the customers visualize tile so they can make a better purchase. There's a tile calculator. There's an AI expert. So it's very knowledgeable about the tile industry, all the terminologies and stuff. So if there's a clerk that's helping, they don't know something, they can look it up. Um, there's a recommendation tool where it's connected to a database, or these are the features. Okay, I built this out. And what I did actually was I duplicated this workflow just so I can show you in case I do something I don't want to mess it up. But this is, I'm in VS Code, and just to give you a quick overview, this is how I layered this is a little bit of back-end engineering stuff. Obviously, I've taken courses. I took a course with Waterloo. It's $1,000 course, best $1,000 I've ever spent because it taught me how to do things. So that's why I recommend you do the same, is just to learn the architectural work. Now, I built things. I have these models, routes. The way I set up the layers is based on this, okay? May not make sense to you if you're not a software person, but this is how I set it up. And this is how I work. I work within these. And when I'm done, I can test it, okay? So um, that's really what I wanted to get at here, is to work in individual isolations. And as you read on this subject more, you're like, oh, I get it now, how to do that. Okay. But this would be too much to cover in this. Okay. That was my little blurb on vibe coding and then my recommended strategy. You're going to save a ton of money doing it this way. Let's move on to some vocabulary now, actually, like get into the actually meat of this presentation. Claude Code has something called Claude.md. .md means markdown file. It's just a type of file that humans and machines can read very easily. Okay. It is like the king file in Claude. And there's a lot of features around this what makes it the king or queen. Okay. First thing is it's just a prompt. Just remember, it's just a prompt. And this prompt is designed to give Claude a set of instructions. It can be used to route Claude code to other folders under circumstances. There's a spelling mistake here. Okay, that's another features about it. What do I mean by routing? If you are, if you want every time this file is read by Claude, if you wanted to go into another file and do something else, you can put those instructions into it and it will do that. But if you don't put those instructions, it won't do that. Claude is read immediately when you open up Claude Code in any folder. It's like built-in feature of Claude Code. So that's why it's sort of the grandmaster kind of thing. The next thing feature about it is that they can live in so Claude MD files in parent directories load automatically at the start of a session. I just mentioned that. Okay. So at the start, when you open up Claude in your folder, Claude reads it. Okay. Claude MD files in subdirectories load on demand only when Claude read works files in that subdirectory. Okay. We have a folder, and you'll see in an instant. And we'll have another folder inside this folder. Okay. This is what I mean by subdirectories. And we can have a Claude MD inside this, and we can also have a Claude MD inside this. But if when Claude Code loads, it will read this one, the folder that you're working in, it'll read it. But if you wanted to read this one, you might have to call it manually on the demand that you have on it. Okay. And these are again instructions because you may not want certain instruction, but essentially that's what this is saying right now. Hopefully that was clear. ColMD files are discovered hierarchically. So parent directories load up front, subdirectories load automatically when you're working in that subdirectory. So this is kind of what I mean by that is that um, the parent folder right here has a Claude MD inside it, and the subdirectory will load based on instructions that you may have put into this. Okay, so it will load so that you can give further instructions to Claude. That's another feature of it. There's something we'll cover in a second called slash. Oh, we got a question here. Is this file Claude generates itself, or should we feed it? Great question. But actually, both can happen. And I'm going to show you, this is exactly what I just came to right now. Slash.init bootstraps a Claude MD by analyzing the code base and makes one. If you can make one yourself, and I recommend to make one yourself, and I will share with you guys a prompt that you can use as a base, especially as the general one. But if you're working inside a project or inside a layer of your project, you can just use this command slash init and it is a command that tells Claude to go create a Claude MD in that project. And you can actually further optimize this by creating something that gives instructions in terms of how to do that. What should be the subsections of that Claude MD. Okay, but Claude has a way of doing that. It'll go read the code base and then it'll do it. Okay. You want to keep it about 200 lines of text. Remember, this is token usage. So every time you open up the thing, it'll read these. It doesn't need to be bloated. It doesn't need to be 1,000 lines. It'll end up using a lot of code. It's best to break up the instructions that you give to Claude. You can have other files that that it gives instructions to. Okay. And it's a set of instructions to give Claude guidelines. I think I've covered everything. It's basically a set of instructions. Okay. Any quick questions on this? Just so I look over here to see if there's anybody confused about what I just said right now. Don't see anything. I'm going to move on. Okay. Let's talk about some more vocabulary. I'm sure you've seen these MCP servers, plugins, skills, hooks, tools. Okay. I'm going to use an analogy of a video game character, like a video game, and hopefully that helps make it easier to understand these terms and what they do. Because if you've played video games, you might be like, oh, okay, I see. It might make it easier for you to remember. That's really the goal here. So MCP, you can think of it as like gears that you pick up or specials that you pick up in a video game that gives your character new abilities. Okay? The Claude Code definition of that is that lets Claude connect to external tools and data sources. So an example would be like Gmail, right? Giving Claude access to Gmail uses something called an MCP server. Okay, and MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It is basically a way for LLMs to communicate with other applications that is standardized for LLMs. Okay. Um, the next one is plugins. And it can be sometimes confusing because what we might know what a plugin is might not be necessarily, what it might be in this context. Um, Definitely, answer that question right now. Difference between connectors and MCPs, basically the same thing. They're just different terms that they've used inside it. It's just an easier way to explain MCPs. They're connectors, but essentially they're doing this similar. Um, Plugins might fall also in the category of connectors because what they're bundles of things. They can be bundles of MCP skills, tools, all kinds of things. So you can think of it in terms of a video game like a mod that you would install on the game, and then you have these different type of features. And the mod is made up of a bunch of different things, not just one thing. And the Claude Code version of that is that it's a shareable package that bundles commands, agents, skills, hooks, a bunch of things together for a whole setup that can be installed in one go. And you can do a bunch of things as a result of that. Okay? It's a bundle, basically. Skills in the form of a game would be like books or scrolls that you would pick up along the way that gives you sort of more knowledge or gives you enhanced version of your current knowledge. So if you know how to like, use a sword, it'll give you better abilities to use a sword now. Okay. And so in the Claude Code version of that is a kind of a reusable package set of instructions, basically a prompt that loads whenever a task is asked for, and if it matches a task. So if you're writing a piece of article and you create a skill, you can tell Claude, use this skill to write this article, and it will use those set of instructions that you put in that skill to do that every time. And it helps isolate these skills so that you call upon them anytime you want them, kind of like knowledge, right? All right, next thing is tools. These are base built-in things that your character can do. Your character can punch, basic, comes out of the box, it can do that. Your character can fly, your character can swim. This is what tools are. And in the context of Claude Code, they're just actions Claude itself can perform. They're built out of the box, like read, edit files, run shell commands, or search code, search generate, all these kind of things. Basic, that's what tools are. Okay. And then hooks are, imagine your character, the moment you approach a like a bad guy, uh, your weapon gets drawn. It's an automatic thing in the game. Your weapon gets drawn the moment you get into a certain proximity of the enemy. That's what hook is. It's an automatic trigger that happens. And in case of Claude Code, these are shell commands that you configure yourself, okay, so that you can then call upon them to enforce, and Claude Code can't bypass it. It's an automatic thing that happens in a certain in a certain moment. Okay, so maybe I misspoke. You don't call upon them; they just automatically happen in a certain situation. But you will describe that situation when you create a hook. Again, hook is almost like a prompt itself. Okay, so that's that. Let's move on here. Another set of categories. We're in a sorry, vocabulary, and now we're talking about things like settings, mode, and effort. Okay. I know I'm not going into Claude Code right now, but at least if you understand these terms, um, then you will have a better time to work in the actual user interface. Okay. Settings are basically a set of things that you do to set up Claude Code to, for instance, what models you might use. Here's an example right here, like what mode it should work in. Okay, and you can build on it as you kind of go because you might decide various things, like for instance, like efforts and stuff like that. It's how when you load Claude, how you want it to function right away. And it's sort of a customized version of your Claude. I might be wanting to work with, Opus 4.8, and you might be working with 4.6. So you change your settings, right? Where you change your settings, you can either go to this route in on your desktop, and it's users, your username, Claude settings. This is where Claude has been saved when you download and install it. Okay. Or when you're in Claude, you just type in this command here, /config, and it'll open up an interactive menu and it'll show you. And we'll do that in a second. I'll show you. Couple things to note is mode. You can run code. You can run basically in ask mode, accept edits mode, plan mode, auto mode. Auto mode is probably the more dangerous one. The first one, ask mode, is Claude can read files freely, but must ask before every edit. This is the one that you tend to start with right away, ask mode. And Claude comes in when you download it, it always asks you a question every time you want to make a change. Accept edits mode, you can read and edit files plus run commands, but anything else like shell commands and stuff like that, it might not be able to do. So it's a layer above, you can say, ask mode, in order to give you a little bit less, give Claude a little bit more control over what happens. Plan mode basically is what I would recommend early on. When I say when you're coming up with something, it'll come up with an entire plan for you. It will use up a ton of tokens, just so you know. Um, so if you want, you can do some of your planning in Claude Chat. And then, because in the chat mode, it doesn't affect you, right? And then you can bring it into Claude Code when you do it. So anyway, it does a lot of planning. And the final one, the reason I said it's dangerous is because Claude can do almost anything. So it's auto mode. It won't stop and ask you questions. You give it full control over everything. Okay. Now, in our settings, this is where you can set some things up and not allow certain things to happen. Okay. And we'll talk about permissions in a second. That's to do with that. The other thing is effort. There's models, right? There's modes, the model that we're using. There's modes, right, that we're in. And then there's effort. And effort, you'll see, can be like low, medium, high. And I think there's an ultra that's just come out right now too. And it's basically about how fast and you want the kind of result to come out, or how much reasoning you want it to do. The more reasoning, the more tokens it's going to use, the slower it's going to be, the more expensive it's going to be. So you should adjust your effort depending on the kind of workflow you're doing. If it's something very quick, stay on the lower one, faster, cheaper. That's really good. If you're doing more complex stuff, go on to the higher effort, gives you better results, especially if you're working with sort of uh, you know, um, less like the model that's not as recent as, like, for instance, 4.8. Okay. All right, so that's that. And I mentioned that I was going to talk to you guys about permissions. This kind of ties into the last slide. But you tend to see this show up when you're working with Claude Code. It is based, you're working out of like a command line interface kind of thing, right? It's like, so whenever you might make an edit, especially if you're in ask mode, it'll say, do you want this edit to be made? And then you get to decide what you want to do. And so you can actually set this up so that certain tools are able to execute and not ask you those questions, right? So you can adjust those permissions. And the way you do that, you run this kind of allow tools um, command, and then it'll take you in places and you can then optimize or you can set your permissions. And remember, a lot of things that you want to do, if you're like, I know I can do this, I forgot how to do it. You can just ask Claude right away and it'll tell you. That's the beauty thing about this. Is like you have an assistant who also knows how to do everything on itself too. So don't worry about if you forget. Um, and if no custom permissions are set, you have this situation. So if you want to do that, just stay with it. Again, permissions are kind of like your settings, which you allow or not allow in part of the game. You might have set that, in the before you even start the game. And again, they live over here in the settings section. Okay. All right, moving on. So slash commands. This will make your life a lot easier. And what I want to do is, one second. I want to create, sorry, a side-by-side panel here and play with them in front of you. So because I'm sure you're tired of seeing slides. Okay, when you know what? I'm gonna go here, exit. When you open up PowerShell or command, or if you're in your Mac, whatever, when you get to this point, you just type in, after you've installed, you just type in Claude, and then you're gonna get this set of questions. Say, just security question. Do I trust this folder? Just say yes. Now we're working out of our this folder here, users admin. This is sort of my user folder. When you're inside a VS Code, for instance, you're going to run it inside a root folder. Right now, this is my root folder right here, and I'm inside that. If I type in Claude here, it's going to open up another session, a brand new session that's not related to what I just opened up. And it knows about, see the location right here? It knows about, uh, for instance, this Claude MD file that I've loaded up here. But I just want to show you this before. I don't want to jump around too much. But anyway, when you're here, these shell commands, you type them here. So if you press /help, you'll see it pop up. And it actually will tell you what it does. It shows help and available commands. So all these 19, which are very common ones you're going to end up using that I showed you here, which, by the way, I will provide in the resources, okay? So don't worry too much about that right now. You can click that, and then it'll give you some options. I'm pressing the left and right arrows on my keyboard, and as you can see, there's all these other commands that exist as well, and they're probably updating it regularly, right? But this is how you run it. There's init, I mentioned to you, that one will create a Claude MD. There's /context, and this here, if you have already a conversation going, it'll give you sort of like a visualized context of usage. Context, usage, and insights you can think of it as basically about usage. Now, I don't have a conversation here, but if I type this, let's see what happens. It'll give you something like this. It'll say system prompts, system tools, memory files, how many tokens have been used across all these things. Okay. So, and then it tell you the model. So it gives you a little more detail of what's happening. Usage will tell you, shows the session cost, essentially. If I type that on right now, it'll tell me where I am, right? And what time it'll reset and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Press cancel. And then insights goes into much more detail as well. It'll generate a report, and the report looks something like this. I know I saved. There it is. It looks something like this, insights. It takes a while, but once it does, it gives you a full report of what's happening, what's working, what's hindering you, quick wins to try, you know, all this report breakdown in terms of what's happening, what you wanted, how you've been using Claude Code essentially. Okay. So maybe you want to do this once a week. Um, no problem. And yeah, just take a look at how you're using it, optimize the way you're using it, it'll give you recommendations here. Okay. Um, and then we have model, right? Set the model so you can change your model here. As you can see, Fable, I think it's called Fable, uh, just dropped here. So you can switch models as you go, right? See, super easy. This you want to learn these. Why? Because you don't want to keep typing in prompts every time. Like if I could just type in like, I would like to change my model. And then now it's got to think, now it's got to come back. Which model do you want to change? You're using up tokens, right? Don't grow on trees, right? So that's why you want to know about them. BTW is, by the way, so if there's a conversation going on, you type in, or there's a processing going on. Let's say you told it to generate a report and it's working. You can type in BTW and ask something else. Ask a side question so you don't have to wait for it. Okay? Tasks, another one, if there's tasks running in the background, it'll tell you what tasks are running. Agents, to set agents. One of the things, and I'll talk to you in a second, is that you can create multiple agents. And actually, sometimes Claude does this automatically. If it's a big task, it's not going to do it all with one agent. It'll split it up into individual components and do the work and then put it together and give it to you. Interesting, eh? In the beginning, I said, don't just go from a prompt to a finished, so-called finished product in one shot, because that's not how an engineer works. Break it up into components. Here it is, Claude, the way they designed it by engineers, does the exact same thing, right? So, MCP, right? You type in manage MCP servers. You get to see what MCP servers you have, right? Oops, I must have typed in. You can always press escape to cancel if you did something else, okay? And then we have hooks. Remember I talked to you guys about this automatic thing that happens? You can basically use hooks to do the configurations. I won't go into it, but I just wanted to tell you about these things. Skills. Um, these are again, it's good for me to repeat it, especially if you're new to it. These are again these set of instructions that tell Claude how to do things. It's a large prompt. It's like a workflow in a way. And you can actually see what skills are available. And then if you want to check, when you call a skill, you type / the name of the skill. Okay? Whatever that name is. And then we have something memory. And then oh man, I went so over, guys. Okay. So we have memory config. This is again, I mentioned that you go into settings, clear, and then we have exit and compact and then loop. Exit, if I want to exit this / exit, right? It just ends up exit the CLI. And loop, finally, is if you want to run a specific type of command on a loop basis on a certain timeline. So it's sort of like it runs on a 5 minute, 10 minute, whatever you want to do on an interval. It's great for when you want to do a test. Okay. Um, cool. So I'm going to minimize this. Go back over here, guys. Okay. We have some shortcuts. I will send this to you guys. Just kind of getting close to the time here, but want to show you just the shortcuts that you can use along with some of these commands here. For instance, if you want to run a shell command, which is sort of like talk to the operating system of your computer, you put an exclamation mark and then you put the command beside it. You can't just dump it in by itself. Like these are these little shortcuts you should know. Toggle full screen mode, right? All these different things. You'll get this in the notes. And finally, sub agents. Sub-agents, I talked briefly about it. They do parallelized work. So if the task is really big, you can actually create your own sub-agents assign them to do this portion, this portion, this portion, and then they come in together and they finish it. And you'll see you can actually monitor it in Claude Code as well. And then you can press like left and arrow. You see right here, it says left. And then you go here and you get to see agents that are currently running and you can make adjustments and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Um, Let me briefly talk to you about the way to set up Claude Code in a hierarchical way. I'm going to need a little more time, guys. I apologize. Normally I set a timer and I have it on the screen here. I forgot today, so I might go a little bit over time. I do understand if you have to go, but obviously there will be the recording afterwards. But I normally am very good on time. I just forgot this, but I want to explain to you guys how to set it up. So you start with a root folder, okay? And inside this root folder, you're going to have that Claude MD file and that I mentioned earlier, that the file that gives sort of a generic. This is your generic Claude MD. It is something that you put into it that gives overall instead of instructions to Claude. What's an example of that look like? Here it is. Apply this to the project folder, be specific, how to work with me, pace and planning, prevent accidental damage. So before deleting something, overwriting or renaming, show me exactly what will change. You're giving a set of instructions as a general overview. It's not about a specific thing, and it'll make sure that Claude behaves the way you want it. Okay, you're kind of training it with this. That's what this Claude MD is. Inside this folder, you have a main project folder. And this is going to be the folder that you're working on. For instance, your app, your particular app that you're building will be inside this folder. If you have another project that you're working on, it'll be in a separate folder. But they're all under this Claude Code root folder and follow this set of Claude Code instructions as well. Okay. Inside these, you'll have its own Claude MD related to the project itself. Because as you go, you want to make sure that the instructions you provide, so you don't have to repeat yourself to Claude every single time, right? That's the whole goal here. Okay. And so in my case, Grout Joint, the app I'm building, this is that folder that I was just talking about right now. This is this, I call it the workstation. And inside this is basically all my code, all my stuff, my applications here, and all these components here. And then inside this, you're going to have those layers that I talked about. Um, when you're building your product, you want to break it up into components. And each of those components are going to have their own Claude MD as well, which will help you stay on top of what's happening in those particular layers. These layers can be features or it can be the way I've organized them. So for instance, for me, these are my those are the folders I was just referring to. These are the ones that are for my models. I have models, and you can see I have a Claude MD inside it. Routers, I have a Claude MD inside it. And they describe what's happening. So if I'm working in this folder and I want Claude to read this and help me figure out what's happening, I can also at the end of the session that I've done some work, I can update this very easily. And a great command to do that with is a slash memory. And then you go into it, and it was part of our slash commands there as well. For slash memory, you go into it, you can ask Claude to update your Claude MD. Okay. This memory MD lives in each of these folders. So I want to be clear. Claude MD, memory MD will be in this one, will be in this one, also will be in this one. And they're very different depending on what the project is. The memory MD is basically a complete organization of everything that occurred inside this application. And it's right here. And it will also contain, it will also organize everything so that if you want to refer back, let's say in about 6 months, you haven't been touching this application for whatever reason because you were working on another side of your business, you can come back and review everything. And I'll give you a prompt that I'm using so you can use it too, at least to get you started, but you want to make one that's for yourself. And so I have some instructions. I have a set of memory in terms of ideas that I've explored, key decisions. Every time you have a session, every time you work on it, you update this memory. And you can easily do it by just saying, update my memory, and you can put into how to do that. You can just put in the instructions inside this. If I say this, just update my memory file. Okay. I want to just quickly just mention, Claude also has something called an auto memory, which it can do this kind of for you. I prefer, but it has its own way of doing it. I prefer for you to make your own memory file, and you want to remember the things that you want to remember. Everyone's going to have different things. You may want to remember things that I don't want to remember, right? So make your own custom one, and then give the instructions. And then inside your Claude MD, you can actually reference this memory MD. So going back into my Claude MD, which is inside this folder. I actually I talk about the code base, right? What directories, the tech stack that I'm using, and all that kind of stuff. And then I talk about the memory system. And I also said, where do things go? So if it's something to do with behavioral rules that I maybe ask Claude not to do or do, right? It'll go into Claude, it'll update Claude. If it's memory related about things like facts of the world. Let's say I learned something and be like, nah, I can't do that. Or project status or decisions, or architectural choices, that'll go into the memory because next time I can always recall back, what did I do that for? Hopefully it's in the memory section and you can double check it. But this is a way of making things easier so that you don't have to go in and manually do things. In fact, you can actually set up clear Claude MD file so that you give it one prompt and it will go in and create different folders for you with different things in it, all that kind of stuff automatically. It's up to you how to do it. It is a prompt essentially, right? Um, so yeah, so wanted to just say this. When you open a project folder, you have under workstation one, Claude Code reads the Claude MD file and then and every parent directory up. So it'll read this as well. So don't worry about that. And one thing to note is that when you're working in this basically root right here, it will not read the Claude MD files in here. It doesn't work sideways. It only works up and down. Okay, so just so you know. Uh, and this is exactly what I kind of just want to show you guys, sort of the configuration, which I ended up showing you along the way, the way I've structured it. I'll show you when you're working, I'm going to end this and I'll show you how to do it from the beginning. So if you're working, if you open up your app, or let's say that even if it's completely blank and you just have folder structure, and you want to start working with Claude, you go to terminal, new terminal, okay? And then second is going to open up the, yeah, okay, Claude, type in that, okay? See how small this is? Just grab this, throw it into here, and it's a lot bigger now. And if you wanted to, you can do it like side by side, but since I'm working with this a lot, I rather have it nice and big and so I can look at it. So now you can do all kinds of things with it, right? We can click on this folder, um, and click on this to look at it, and we can start interacting with it and make changes to the code, all that kind of stuff. If you want to change our configuration, open up settings, look at usage, status, right? All kinds of things here. So that was hopefully not too much, but that was the idea. We did a bunch of this stuff already, so I'm not probably don't need to do that. But essentially, guys, that was it. I will open it up to questions. And just before I do that, I want to let you know that next Monday I'm doing a more detailed Claude Code. This was like a drinking out of a fire hose for many of you if it was like brand new, or maybe for some of you was more of a refresher. But this will more focus on a particular workflow, setting up a second brain, setting up an environment where you can provide it information and it'll hold it and organize it so that you have a very strong knowledge base, especially if you're doing research or secondary research on a particular subject. instead of creating a bunch of tabs and saying, oh, I'll look at it later, you can digest all of these. And then you can have sort of a second brain and you can connect it to your co-work and other places or agents. But it's good to build this and maybe start now because that's the direction we're headed. We're going to a direction where it's going to get easier and easier to have agents that access your desktop and do things, and they always should have access to information. So better start now building the sort of this infrastructure of a second brain now than later.